I never thought I would find myself in a situation like this. My name is Mark, and I was married to Sarah for 6 years. We had what I thought was a solid relationship, built on love, friendship, and a shared passion for tennis. But lately, things had been feeling off. It started with little things: her late nights at work, her phone always locked, and the way she seemed to be more interested in her appearance. I brushed it off as stress from her job as a marketing executive. After all, we all have tough weeks, right? But the signs kept piling up. There was that time when she insisted on going out with the girls for drinks on a Friday night. I was sitting on the couch, flipping through channels when I got a text from my tennis buddy Jake. He casually mentioned seeing Sarah at a bar, laughing and flirting with some guy. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe she was just letting loose. But deep down, a knot formed in my stomach that I couldn't shake. One Saturday, while cleaning out the garage, I stumbled upon her old tennis bag. I didn't think anything of it until I found a crumpled piece of paper with a guy's name and phone number, Mark Thompson. I felt my heart racing. I knew a Mark Thompson. He was my tennis partner. That was when everything started to click. I felt sick. The signs, the late nights, the secretive behavior, what I had dismissed all this time was suddenly glaringly obvious. After a week of sleepless nights filled with anxiety and anger, I decided to confront her. I gathered all the evidence I had and waited for her to come home. When she stepped through the door, I shut it behind her, blocking her escape. "We need to talk," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Her expression shifted from surprise to annoyance, and that's when I saw the real Sarah, the defensive, bitchy version of my wife. "What now, Mark? I had a long day at work," she snapped, rolling her eyes. I pulled out the crumpled piece of paper. "What's this?" I asked, holding it out like a smoking gun. She scoffed at it. "It's nothing, just a guy from the gym." "You're being ridiculous." "Ridiculous," I said, my voice rising. "This is Jake's name on this paper. You're sleeping with my tennis partner." The accusation hung in the air like a foul odor. Her face paled, but she quickly regained her composure. "Oh, come on, Mark. You know how guys are. It's just tennis. You're overreacting." I felt the rage boiling inside me. "Overreacting? You're lying to my face. I saw you at that bar with him." She crossed her arms, leaning against the wall, her eyes narrowing. "Fine. So what if I had a drink with him? We're just friends." "You're so paranoid. It's pathetic." Pathetic. I felt like I was the one who had been stabbed in the back. The anger morphed into sadness as it dawned on me. My wife was not only lying, but was also completely dismissive of my feelings. I decided in that moment that I had to take control. If she was cheating on me with my tennis partner, I would make sure both of them would regret it. I didn't know exactly what this would look like yet, but the seed of revenge had been planted, and it was going to grow. After that confrontation, things changed dramatically between Sarah and me. We were living under the same roof, but it felt like we were two strangers forced together by circumstance. She would come and go, often later than usual, and I would spend my evenings plotting my next move. I was drowning in this sea of betrayal, but I wasn't about to let her see how much she got to me. My mind kept circling back to the idea of revenge, and it became an obsession. I started going to the tennis club more frequently, not just to play, but to analyze. I watched Jake closely, the way he moved, his strengths, and more importantly, his weaknesses. The more I observed him, the more I realized how much he relied on certain tactics that I could exploit. I had never thought of tennis as a game of psychological warfare, but that was about to change. One evening, while I was on the court practicing my serves, I noticed Jake and Sarah chatting in the bleachers, laughing like nothing was amiss. The sight of them together made my blood boil. I couldn't just sit back and do nothing while they played house behind my back. My heart raced as I approached them. Feigning nonchalance. "Hey, what's going on?" I asked, forcing a smile that felt more like a grimace. "Oh, just talking strategy for our upcoming match," Jake said, scratching the back of his head. Sarah shot him a glance, and I could see the concern in her eyes. She didn't want me to know about their conversations, but I had already pieced enough together. "Cool, can I join?" I offered, trying not to show how cunning I was becoming. I was ready to play the long game. They exchanged awkward glances before Sarah said, "Sure, we can all practice together. I mean, it's a team sport, right?" Over the next few weeks, I put my plan into action. I started winning matches, both against other players and eventually against Jake. I practiced nonstop, focusing on my serves, my footwork, and my strategy. I wanted to ensure that every time Jake and I went head-to-head, he was forced to confront a level of play he hadn't seen from me before. But it wasn't just about practice. I started spreading little rumors around the club. Whenever I would win a match against Jake, I would casually mention how he seemed off his game, how he didn't look like the sharp player I used to know. It wasn't long before whispers began circulating about his performance, affecting his confidence greatly. Meanwhile, I was on a winning streak, and my competitive spirit was ignited by the betrayal that had once left me feeling helpless. At home, Sarah was becoming increasingly frustrated with Jake's declining performance. "What's wrong with him? He used to be so good," she would complain, her voice dripping with irritation. I would nod, feigning ignorance, while secretly relishing in every word. One weekend, during a local tournament, the tension reached its peak. I had made it to the finals, and so had Jake. I could see Sarah in the stands, her expression a mix of support and worry, and in that moment I was reminded of just how much I wanted to win, not just for me, but for the betrayal that had become my fuel. As we took to the court, I felt an adrenaline rush unlike anything I had experienced before. This was it, the moment I had been building up to. The match started and I played like a man possessed. Each serve I threw down was laced with a sense of justice, and every point I scored was a small victory against Sarah's deceit. I could feel Jake's frustration mounting as he struggled to keep up with my newfound aggression. With every shot, I reminded myself of her lies, of the betrayal, and of the way she had dismissed my feelings. As the match progressed, I took the lead, and I could hear Sarah's supportive cheers fading into nervous silence. I was winning, and with every point scored, it felt like I was reclaiming a part of myself that had been lost in the wake of her infidelity. As the final point was scored, the crowd erupted in cheers, but all I could focus on was Jake's defeated look. I had done it. I had made sure he lost, and in doing so, I had taken a significant step toward reclaiming my sense of self. I wanted to savor that feeling, but I knew this was just the beginning. I was on a path of revenge, and now I had to decide what to do with the victory I had just earned. After my decisive victory over Jake, I felt an exhilarating rush, but the aftermath was bittersweet. While I stood there basking in the adoration of my fellow players, I couldn't shake the feeling of emptiness that lingered in the back of my mind. Winning the match was just a temporary high. It was nothing compared to the pain of betrayal I was grappling with at home. As I walked off the court, Sarah rushed to me, her eyes sparkling with pride. "Mark, that was amazing. I knew you could do it," she exclaimed, throwing her arms around me. The warmth of her embrace felt strange after what had transpired between us. I forced a smile, knowing that my heart was still heavy with the weight of her infidelity. "Thanks," I managed to say, pulling away and scanning the crowd for Jake. He had disappeared, likely embarrassed and upset. I felt a mix of satisfaction and guilt, but I quickly brushed it aside. This was not the time to feel sorry for him. I had a plan in place, and I was determined to see it through. That evening, Sarah was in a celebratory mood. We went out for dinner to a fancy restaurant, and she rambled on about how great it was that I had won the tournament. I could see the tension in her face every time I mentioned Jake and his poor performance. I seized the opportunity to manipulate the situation further. I think the pressure got to him. He wasn't himself today. Maybe he needs a little more practice," I suggested, keeping my tone light and casual. "Oh, come on, Mark. You know he was just off his game," she replied, her irritation barely concealed. This was the moment I had been waiting for. I leaned in, lowering my voice as if sharing a secret. "Maybe it's more than that. I heard some rumors floating around that he's been distracted lately. Apparently, he's got some personal issues." I watched her face closely, gauging her reaction. "What kind of personal issues?" she asked, her interest piqued. I shrugged, pretending to be nonchalant. "Just some stuff in his life. You know how it goes, pressure can get to anyone." I could see the gears turning in her mind. She clearly had no idea that I was playing her. I was feeding her doubts about Jake, and she was eating it up. I began to feel a sense of power surging within me. Not only was I winning on the court, but I was also winning in the psychological game we were playing. As the weeks passed, I continued my winning streak, and so did the rumors about Jake's personal life. They morphed into whispers that made their way through the tennis club, feeding on his vulnerability. I could see Jake getting more frustrated with every match, and Sarah's support began to wane. Dynamic shifted, and soon she started to doubt his commitment both to tennis and to her. One night after a particularly taxing practice session, Sarah came home looking defeated. I pretended to be concerned, but inside I reveled in her distress. "What's wrong?" I asked, feigning innocence. "It's Jake. He's just not the same. He's been missing practice, and I don't think he's really committed to the team anymore. I don't know what's going on with him," she admitted, her voice tinged with frustration. I leaned in closer, lowering my voice again. "You know, maybe it's time to consider that he's not the right fit for you. I mean, you deserve someone who's all in, right?" Her eyes widened, and for the first time I saw a flicker of doubt in her expression. "You think so?" she asked, biting her lip. "Absolutely," I replied, my heart racing. "If he can't even prioritize practice, how can you trust him to be there for you?" That conversation marked a turning point in our relationship. I had planted seeds of doubt about Jake in Sarah's mind, and it was starting to take root. I became the supportive husband while subtly dismantling her connection with my former friend. With every match that Jake lost, I felt a sense of vindication. It was as if I was reclaiming not just my place on the court, but also my dignity in my marriage. I began to realize that my revenge was not just about Jake's losses on the court. It was about making Sarah question everything she had taken for granted. But as I sank deeper into this web of manipulation, I couldn't help but wonder, where would this path lead me? Would I ultimately find peace in my heart, or was I creating a darker version of myself that I might regret? These thoughts nagged at me even as I reveled in my success, but I pushed them aside. For now, I was committed to seeing this through to the end. As weeks turned into months, the tension between Sarah and Jake escalated. My plan was working brilliantly. Jake's performance had plummeted, and Sarah was beginning to doubt his loyalty and commitment. I watched as she shifted her focus more towards me, seeking reassurance and support, unaware that I was the one who had orchestrated her growing doubts about him. I felt powerful, yet the more I reveled in my triumph, the more I questioned where this path was leading me. One Saturday afternoon, I found myself at the tennis club, warming up for a match against a new opponent. As I practiced my serves, I noticed Jake sitting alone on the bleachers, his head buried in his hands. He looked defeated, a shadow of the confident player I once knew. I felt a pang of sympathy, but it quickly faded as I reminded myself of the reasons behind my acts of revenge. He had betrayed me, and now he was losing everything. I approached him cautiously, feigning concern. "Hey man, you okay?" He looked up, his eyes red and weary. "Not really. I've been struggling lately. I feel like I'm letting everyone down, especially Sarah." I played the part of the understanding friend. "It happens to the best of us. Maybe you just need to take a break, clear your head." "Yeah, maybe," he muttered. I could see the frustration etched on his face. "But it's hard when I know Sarah is counting on me." "Don't worry about it. Just focus on yourself for a bit," I said, hiding my smirk behind a mask of faux sympathy. Inside, I was reveling in the chaos I had created. Later that day, I won my match easily. I was on a roll, and with every victory, I felt more like a villain in a twisted drama. The thrill of revenge was intoxicating, but I couldn't ignore the growing emptiness gnawing at my conscience. The more I manipulated Sarah's feelings, the more I felt like I was losing a part of myself. One evening, Sarah and I were sitting on the couch, and she brought up Jake again. "I don't know what to do about him, Mark. He's just not himself lately. It's like he doesn't care." I looked at her, my heart racing as I prepared to dig the knife in deeper. "Maybe it's time to have a serious conversation with him. You deserve someone who's fully committed, and if he can't deliver, it might be better to cut ties." She looked thoughtful, and I could see the wheels turning in her mind. "You're right. I shouldn't settle for less. I just wish he'd be straightforward with me." As the weeks went by, Sarah began distancing herself from Jake. She started to confide in me more, sharing her doubts and frustrations while also leaning on me for support. It felt good to have her trust, and I reveled in the power I wielded in her life. I was closing the gap between us, but I was also aware that this was a dangerous game. One evening, after a particularly tense practice, Sarah came home visibly upset. "I confronted Jake today," she said, her voice shaking. "I asked him why he's been so distant and he just shut down. He wouldn't even look at me." I feigned concern once again, though inside I felt a surge of triumph. "What did he say?" "He said he's just been going through a rough time, that it has nothing to do with me. But I can't shake the feeling that he's hiding something," she admitted, tears brimming in her eyes. I reached out, pulling her into a comforting embrace. "You don't deserve that, Sarah. You deserve someone who respects you enough to be honest." As I held her, I felt a mix of emotions. I was glad to be the one providing her comfort, but I couldn't ignore the fact that I was the architect of her pain. I was tearing down her relationship with Jake while simultaneously fortifying my own with her. But at what cost? The next day, I decided to escalate my plan. I approached Jake again, this time with a more sinister intent. "You know, Sarah is really worried about you. She feels like you're not committed to her anymore," I said, watching him squirm. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I leaned in closer, letting my words sink in. "She's being supportive, but she can't help but feel like you're pulling away. Maybe you should show her you care, go the extra mile, or she might start questioning things." Jake looked visibly shaken. "I can't lose her, Mark. I need to get back on track." "Then do something about it, man," I urged, stepping back and leaving him to ponder my words. I knew he would feel the pressure, and that pressure would only push him further into despair, making him easier to defeat on the court. As I walked away, I felt a rush of exhilaration. I was orchestrating their downfall, but I was also starting to feel the weight of my actions. I had planned to take revenge on Jake, but I was also playing with Sarah's heart. I needed to decide what kind of man I wanted to be. Would I continue down this dark path, or was it time for me to confront my own demons? The line between revenge and self-destruction was beginning to blur, and I knew I had to tread carefully. As much as I wanted to see Jake lose, I had to keep my own integrity intact if I wanted to salvage anything from this mess. But for now, revenge was sweet, and I was not yet ready to relinquish the thrill of victory. As the days turned into weeks, the psychological warfare I was waging began to take its toll, not just on Jake, but on my own mental state. Sarah's doubt towards him deepened, and with every passing day, I felt both empowered and increasingly burdened by my choices. It was a precarious balancing act. I was the one she turned to for support, but I was also the one orchestrating the unraveling of her relationship with Jake. One evening during dinner, Sarah looked particularly pensive. I could see her mind racing as she pushed her food around on the plate. "Mark, can we talk about Jake?" she finally said, her voice shaky. "Of course," I replied, feigning concern. "What's on your mind?" She took a deep breath, her eyes welling with tears. "I just don't understand why he's been acting this way. It's like he's lost interest in everything, including me. I feel like I'm losing him, and it scares me." As I listened to her, I felt a pang of guilt. I wanted to be the loving husband she needed, but I was also deeply entrenched in this game of revenge. "You deserve someone who is fully present, Sarah. If he can't see that, then you have to consider whether he's worth it," I said, allowing my words to sink in. "What if it's just a phase? What if he's going through something?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Sarah, you can't keep waiting around for someone who isn't showing you the love you deserve," I said, my heart pounding. I was pushing her further away from Jake, but I couldn't help it. The thrill of the game was intoxicating. That night, as I lay in bed next to her, I felt a disquieting unease. I was winning, but at what cost? I had manipulated her feelings and undermined her trust in Jake, and while I was basking in victory, the emotional toll was heavy. I was losing sight of who I was and what I truly wanted. The next day at the tennis club, I found Jake in the locker room, looking more disheveled than usual. His eyes were bloodshot, and he appeared to have lost weight. I felt a twisted sense of satisfaction at the sight. "Hey man, you okay?" I asked, masking my glee with a facade of concern. "I'm just really struggling with everything," he admitted, his voice defeated. "I've been thinking about talking to Sarah, but I'm not sure if it will even help." Maybe you should, I suggested, my heart racing at the thought of him pulling his act together. But you need to show her you're serious. She deserves a partner who will fight for her. He nodded, and I saw a flicker of hope in his eyes. I'll try to reach out to her. As he left, I felt a rush of anxiety. What if he actually did it? What if he pulled himself together and rekindled things with Sarah? I couldn't allow that to happen. I needed to keep the pressure on, and if I was going to do that, I needed to escalate my game. That weekend, I invited Sarah to a barbecue at the club. It was a casual affair, and I knew Jake would be there. My plan was to create a scene that would push her further away from him. I wanted to expose Jake's vulnerabilities and make it clear that I was the better choice. As the sun set, laughter and chatter filled the air. I watched as Sarah mingled with friends, but my eyes were fixed on Jake. He arrived looking tense, and I could see the pressure weighing heavily on him. It was the perfect opportunity. I made my way over to Sarah, wrapping my arm around her shoulders and pulling her close. "Let's go check on the burgers," I suggested, and she nodded, grinning at me. As we walked over, I noticed Jake standing alone, deep in thought. I leaned in closer to Sarah, still maintaining the facade of a supportive husband. "You know, it's really sad to see Jake this way. He used to be such a vibrant guy, but now—" I let my voice trail off, letting the implication hang in the air. "What do you mean?" she asked, genuinely curious. "I just think he's lost his way," I replied, my heart racing with excitement. "I mean, look at him. He seems so distant, like he doesn't even want to be here." Sarah glanced over at Jake, and I could see the gears turning in her mind. She looked back at me, her expression pained. "Maybe he just needs a little time. Or maybe he's just not the right guy for you," I interjected, my voice low. "You deserve someone who is fully committed to you, someone who will fight for your happiness. If he can't do that, is it really worth holding on to?" She bit her lip, clearly torn. I watched as she weighed my words, and for the first time I saw doubt creep into her eyes. I felt a surge of triumph, but it was accompanied by that nagging guilt again. As the night progressed, I made sure to keep the conversation focused on Jake's shortcomings. I casually mentioned how he had been missing practices, how he seemed uninterested in being a part of their relationship. Each piece of information was carefully crafted to push her further away from him. By the time we left the barbecue, Sarah was visibly shaken. "You're right, Mark. I don't know if I can keep waiting for him to come around. I just wish things were different," she said, her voice cracking. I wrapped my arms around her, feeling a sense of victory and despair at the same time. I had achieved what I set out to do. But I was also aware that I was tearing down the very fabric of our relationship. As I held her close, I realized that my quest for revenge was leading me down a path I might not be able to come back from. In that moment, I knew that there were consequences to my actions. I was winning the battle, but at the risk of losing the war for my integrity and the love we had once shared. It was time for me to confront the reality of what I was doing, not just to Jake, but to Sarah and ultimately to myself. As the days passed after the barbecue, the emotional weight of my actions became increasingly unbearable. I was winning every match, and Sarah was distancing herself from Jake, but it all felt hollow. The thrill of revenge had morphed into a gnawing realization that I was playing with people's hearts, including my own. I was pushing Sarah further away from someone who, despite his flaws, had once been a close friend and partner. I watched as Sarah began to pull away from Jake, going so far as to ignore his calls and texts. It was heart-wrenching to see how my manipulations had turned her love into confusion and doubt. Each time she shared her frustrations with me, I felt a mix of pride and guilt. I was the one who had orchestrated her feelings, and while I could relish the power I held, I was also aware of the emotional destruction I was causing. One evening, I was home alone, sitting on the couch, and the reality of my actions hit me like a ton of bricks. I realized that my quest for revenge had not only damaged Jake, but had also driven a wedge between Sarah and me. I had become someone I barely recognized, a manipulator who thrived on the pain of others. I didn't want to be that person anymore. The next day, I decided it was time to confront both Sarah and Jake to put an end to this toxic cycle. I knew I had to confess to Sarah and take responsibility for my actions, and I felt a knot of anxiety in my stomach as I prepared for what I anticipated would be a tumultuous conversation. That evening, I sat down with Sarah at our dining table. The atmosphere was tense and heavy with unspoken words. "Sarah, we need to talk," I began, trying to keep my voice steady. "What about?" she asked, a look of concern crossing her face. "I need to be honest with you about something, and I think you deserve to know the truth," I said, my heart racing. "I've been manipulating things between you and Jake. I've fed you doubts and rumors, and I've done it all because I was hurt and angry." Her eyes widened in disbelief, and I could see her processing what I had just revealed. "Do you mean you've been lying to me?" "I have," I admitted, feeling the weight of my guilt crashing down on me. "I wanted to hurt him because I felt betrayed, but in doing so I hurt you too. I've twisted your feelings and made you doubt someone who was once important to you." "Why would you do that?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I trusted you, Mark." "I know," I replied, tears beginning to well up in my eyes. "I let my anger consume me, and I thought it would make me feel better, but it didn't. I'm so sorry for what I put you through." Sarah looked away, clearly grappling with her emotions. "I can't believe you would do that. You've changed so much." "I know I have," I said, my voice breaking. "But I want to change back. I want to be the husband you deserve, and I don't want to lose you over my mistakes." After a moment of silence, she nodded slowly. "I need time to process this, Mark. I don't know what this means for us." I understood. I had crossed a line that couldn't be easily erased. "Take all the time you need. I'll be here when you're ready to talk." With that, I knew I had to face Jake as well. It was time to come clean to him and try to make amends if I could. The next day, I reached out to Jake, asking if we could meet at the club. My heart raced at the prospect of facing him, knowing that I was the architect of his downfall. When I arrived, he was already there, pacing nervously. "What's going on, Mark?" "I thought we could meet to talk about things between us," he said, his expression cautious. "Yeah, about that, I have to apologize," I said, taking a deep breath. "I've been manipulating things between you and Sarah. I've spread rumors, and I wanted you to fail because I was hurt by what happened between you two." Jake looked taken aback, his eyes narrowing as he absorbed my words. "You did what?" "You've been lying to her about me." "Yeah, and I'm sorry. I let my anger get the best of me, and I was wrong to involve you in my revenge," I admitted, feeling the weight of my actions hanging heavily between us. He shook his head in disbelief. "I can't believe you would stoop that low. I thought you were my friend." "I know, and I messed up. I just wanted to hurt you because I was hurt, but I've realized that I was only hurting Sarah in the process," I confessed. "I don't expect your forgiveness, but I want you to know that I'm truly sorry." After a long silence, he spoke, his voice steady. "You need to fix this, Mark. I don't care what happens between me and Sarah anymore, but you need to figure out what kind of person you want to be." With those words, I realized I had a long road ahead of me. I had hurt those I cared about, and the path to redemption would require me to confront my actions and their consequences. In the weeks that followed, I tried to make amends, not just with Sarah and Jake, but with myself. I sought therapy to work through my emotions and learned to communicate my feelings openly and honestly. It was a difficult journey, but I was determined to rebuild the trust I had shattered. Eventually, Sarah and I had a heart-to-heart conversation, and although it was painful, we began to find a way back to each other. She needed time, but I was willing to wait and prove that I was committed to being a better partner. In the end, I learned that revenge may provide temporary satisfaction, but it comes at a cost that far outweighs any fleeting victory. I had to confront my own demons, and in doing so, I discovered a deeper understanding of love, trust, and the importance of honesty in relationships. I would carry these lessons with me, forever changed by the experience, and I was determined to become a better man, not just for Sarah, but for myself.